Stand by.
Live from 12 Studios, this is News 12 at 6.
Tonight on News 12 at 6, a rainy start to the week ending in a beautiful sunny weekend, and Tom Hale says it could stay like this, how warm it could get for the first full week of June.
Protests and riots across the country as people demand justice for George Floyd. I'm Garrett Tenney in Minneapolis, and I've got the details coming up.
A second attempt at making space history, and we have liftoff. I'm Phil Keating at the Kennedy Space Center on the Space Coast of Florida, where SpaceX and NASA are now rocketing into space. Details coming up.
Good evening and welcome to News 12 at 6. I'm Meredith McCown. More unrest across the country as people demand justice for George Floyd. Fox News correspondent Garrett Tenney has more.
States are taking action after another night of protest over the death of George Floyd.
This is the largest civilian deployment in Minnesota history that we have out there today.
Minnesota Governor Tim Walz activating the state's entire National Guard for the first time in history. This comes after 4 days of protest stemming from the death of George Floyd, who died while in police custody. Friday night, more unrest as demonstrators burned cars and buildings and looted stores.
The voices of peaceful protest are being hijacked by violent radical elements.
Don't shoot! Hands up! Don't shoot!
From Portland, Oregon to New York City, demonstrations ranged from peaceful to violent.
The violence then obscures the righteousness of the message and the mission.
Georgia's governor declaring a state of emergency after some people burned police cars and blocked streets in Atlanta. In Washington, D.C., a group of protesters tried to push through barriers near the White House, throwing bottles at Secret Service and police officers in riot gear.
I want to thank Secret Service. They were incredible last night at the White House.
Criminal charges were filed Friday against Derek Chauvin, the officer who held his knee on Floyd's neck for nearly 9 minutes. A preliminary autopsy report found a combination of the restraint, potential intoxicants, and underlying health issues likely contributed to Floyd's death. Floyd's family has requested a second independent autopsy be done. The doctor performing the new autopsy also performed one on Eric Garner, a black man who died after New York City police placed him in a chokehold. In Minneapolis, I'm Garrett Tenney, Fox News.
As tensions rise during protests in Texas over police brutality, Governor Greg Abbott has sent major cities like Dallas state resources and help from the Texas Department of Public Safety. The protest in Dallas last night over the in-custody death of George Floyd and other police-related deaths involving black residents began as a peaceful demonstration, but soon groups unrelated to the march could be seen confronting officers, destroying property, and looting various businesses. Abbott said he sent more than 1,500 Texas DPS officers to help maintain safety in Dallas, Austin, Houston, and San Antonio as protests continue. Checking weather, the rain is over for now, but does that mean sunshine is to come more this week? Tom Hale joins us in the Weather Center. Tom, tell us about it.
Well, what we've got going on is blue skies across all of Texoma, lakes looking good. And as for drought conditions, well, thanks to May and April and March and so forth, there is no drought conditions across Texoma. Now, that could change as we go through the summer, but highs today were above this. We were around 84 degrees on average. We've cooled down about 1 degree right now. And overnight, because the air is dry, just like last night, we tumbled into the upper 50s. We'll tumble not as far, but with near calm winds, 61. And then tomorrow, that dry air and blue clear skies means temperatures in the mid 80s. And what's the rest of the week look like? Stay tuned.
Thanks, Tom. It's an historic day for America. All systems were a go as the first manned mission to space from American soil in nearly a decade blasted off today after the experimental flight was scrubbed on Wednesday. Phil Keating is at the Kennedy Space Center with the details of the first of its kind mission, kicking off a new era in human space travel.
All eyes on Florida as America makes its return to space.
Liftoff of the Falcon 9 and Crew Dragon. Go NASA, go SpaceX, Godspeed, Spot and Dog.
After weather postponed Wednesday's launch, the milestone mission is now underway, ushering in a new era for the country's space program. SpaceX and NASA teaming up for the experimental flight, marking the first time in history a private space company is carrying a crew into orbit, and 9 years since America sent men into space from American soil.
The vehicle is supersonic.
At 3:22 Eastern Time, the veteran astronauts Doug Hurley and Bob Behnken blasted off inside the SpaceX Crew Dragon capsule, propelled by the company's massive Falcon 9 rocket.
They're not just military pilots, but they're also test pilots. They helped SpaceX actually develop the vehicle, not just the capsule, but the rocket. They've been very involved for 5 years in the development process.
Hurley and Behnken were strapped in and ready to go on Wednesday when the launch was scrubbed minutes before liftoff. And Saturday, they went through the same hours-long pre-flight preparations, including saying goodbye to their families and taking the drive in a Tesla Model X to launch pad 39A to board the capsule. Saturday afternoon, the president and vice president returned to Florida to witness two brave astronauts make the next giant leap into history. After a roughly 19-hour trip from the launch pad to the space station Sunday morning, the Crew Dragon will dock to the hatch of the ISS. Hurley and Behnken will then live and work on board for 1 to 4 months. At the Kennedy Space Center, Phil Keating, Fox News.
There are 19 new COVID-19 cases in Texoma today. Choctaw County added 7, Carter and Bryan both added 2, and McCurtain and Stevens County each added 1 new case. McCurtain County also confirmed its first death today, making 23 total deaths across Texoma. Grayson County reported 6 new cases today for a total of 333. There have been 785 COVID-19 cases across Texoma so far. Nearly 490 people have recovered. The Oklahoma Department of Corrections says state prisons will be reopened for inmate visitation, but with precautions. The department said in a news release that visitors will be allowed starting next weekend, but must remain in their car until called, wear a mask, and show no symptoms of COVID-19 among the safety measures. Today, the State Health Department of Oklahoma reported at least 6,418 total confirmed COVID-19 cases and 334 deaths in the state. The Texas A&M University System of Regents voted to reopen all 11 university campuses for the fall semester. The plan calls for using smaller classes and longer class days to reduce congestion between classes. Classes will be offered face-to-face, but not all students will be in the classroom at the same time. They're encouraging students to leave the building between classes when possible to avoid congregating in hallways and lobbies. As schools begin to try and reopen, a look at other parts of the world could provide a glimpse at how schools across the U.S. could look when classes do resume. Fox News correspondent Doug McKelway has the story.
Under a shade tree near the locked doors of an elementary school, James, a third grader, is quietly reading a book. Nearby, Zoe Brennan is knocking the stuffing out of softballs, hoping to make varsity if there's a season. No one knows for sure what the fall will bring. There are mixed signals from abroad.
It is a long and complicated process, but we'll face it with dignity.
In Israel, where schools reopened 2 weeks ago, one closed again last Friday after 11 students and 7 teachers tested positive. In South Korea, schools today limited elementary and junior highs to 1/3 and high schools to 2/3 of capacity after a new outbreak. Across the U.S. and thousands of school districts, talk of how and when to reopen has begun.
All of us across the nation are frankly talking and watching each other. You watch a little bit internationally as well.
It is a collaborative effort involving administrators, health experts, parents, and teachers. Each school is unique given the size of classrooms, the age and health of staff, and numerous factors. Among some commonplace ideas, socially distant spacing, temperature checks, hand washing stations, half days with cleaning between morning and afternoon sessions, or classes every other day to include some online learning, meals at desks only, limiting contact sports and some extracurricular activities, and wearing masks.
By this time next year, I would hope they're all in there all the time.
Holding a powerful potential veto are unions. The American Federation of Teachers alone represents 1.7 million teachers, nurses, food service workers, and bus drivers.
If I don't think a school is safe, I'm not going to say it's safe. I think talking about strikes are a last resort.
These are all subject to change depending in part on the state's phased reopenings and on the course of the virus itself. Many school administrators are planning for 3 contingencies: a full reopening, a partial reopening, or distance learning again.
Stand by.
In Falls Church, Virginia, Doug McKelway, Fox News.
Thank you.
Amusement parks opening back up across the country, but they will look a lot different. The changes they're making to keep guests safe.
Checking, and they roll. Stand by.
Walt Disney World announced their plans to reopen. Safety measures include contactless payments, mobile ordering, temperature screenings, and face coverings will be required. And this could pave the way for how we visit amusement parks. Grady Trimble has more from a Six Flags park in Illinois.
Many U.S. theme parks reopening in the coming days, and when they do, you'll expect to see several changes. Six Flags implementing a lot of the same changes other theme parks are. I want to show you this safety video. All guests going to Six Flags theme parks will be required to watch this before their visit. They'll also have to reserve their spot at the park online so that Six Flags can limit capacity at its locations. When guests arrive, they'll have thermal cameras to check their temperatures, and if they're allowed into the park, guests will be required to wear masks, and theme park employees will be as well. So far, Six Flags announcing the reopening of one of its parks in Oklahoma. That'll be June 5th. It hasn't set any dates for other parks across the country. In respect to that, Six Flags saying as businesses begin to reopen around the country, we're working closely with state and local officials to determine when we may be able to do so. Disney not opening until July 11th in Orlando. That'll be Magic Kingdom and Animal Kingdom, followed by the other 2 parks there. But Disney did open its Shanghai location earlier this month, giving us a preview of what parks will look like. You'll see a lot of face masks there and social distancing guidelines in place as well. SeaWorld planning to open its location in Orlando soon as well. Its interim CEO telling Fox Business he believes there's pent-up demand for parks right now.
Our surveys tell us people are anxious to get out, and I think you've seen that across the country, and people want to come and have a good time at theme parks. We can do it in a safe manner. We've been operating our parks for decades.
Another thing you might expect to see if you're planning to visit a theme park anytime soon is the expansion of contactless payment methods. Disney already has this with its Magic Bands, but as other theme parks continue to reopen during the pandemic, that technology could be expanded. In Gurnee, Illinois, Grady Trimble, Fox Business.
Up next, we're taking a look at our next chance of, I don't see any rain. I guess you'll just have to stick around and we'll figure it out together.
Stand by.
Now, your award-winning local sports coverage. Here's Travis Buckner.
On March 11th, the NBA became the first major sport to postpone its season when a player tested positive for the coronavirus. And here we are now about 2.5 months later, and we still have not seen a basketball game. But things are definitely pointing in the right direction. The NBA has announced that July 1st is their target date to return to the court, and we could know as soon as Thursday if that will be the case. The league's Board of Governors will vote on June 4th and are expected to approve the commissioner's plan to start the season in Orlando. Teams who are currently in a playoff spot or within 6 games of a playoff spot will make the trip. It also says they plan on playing multiple regular season games to help players reaccommodate to before the postseason starts, and there will be playing games to determine the final spots in each conference. The NBA will need a 3/4 majority of owners' approval to play, but again, it is expected to pass. Meanwhile, the MLB is taking almost the exact opposite approach. There still has not been any movement when it comes to the big players returning to play. There is a chance of the MLB return that players will not make about half their amount they were supposed to earn, but the craziest part of it is players who aren't active will still receive their full payment. So if you remember, the Rangers signed Prince Fielder, and he was set to make $24 million through the 2020 season, and will still get all of that money even though he retired in 2016. So that means Prince Fielder will make over $20 million, which could make him the highest paid player in 2020. On the Sports 12 Rewind tonight, we're going to do things a little bit differently. Instead of looking at one game or one moment, we're going to look back at a season, which is the Trenton Tigers 2019 football campaign. Trenton's story is a pretty unique one. Between the years of 1960 and 2011, they did not have a varsity football team. Then they returned to the field for the first time in 2012. But in 2019, things began to turn in the right direction, and they made the playoffs for the first time in school history. We'll have more on that coming up tonight at 10, and we'll be right back.
Commercial checking 0.